I found myself in a creative slump lately, which is why I haven't uploaded to YouTube in quite some time. Now, I'm not saying this to throw a pity party or get on a soapbox. It's relative to this video because when I find myself plateauing creatively, it could be a complex issue. And to answer complexity, it's often a simple solution that works. So for me, I like to strip photography back to its bare bones basics and take away what makes one a skillful photographer and simply focus on composition. So I'm not paying attention to what ISO I should use, a narrow or shallow aperture, or should I have some motion blur, get a crisp image. I just back up a bit and look at the grander scheme of things, the bigger composition, if you will. And doing so, I used this Holga Digital camera for the last few months. So what is it? Looks like a toy. In fact, it is a toy camera, that is, with little to no manual controls, and it creates Lomo style images. Of what that means to the casual consumer, or maybe a lummox, it makes grainy, dingy into some unusable looking images purposefully. Another thing you should know about this camera is it's unreasonably expensive in today's market. When I bought this 5 years ago, I found it used for $15, and now it's skyrocketed to about $100 to $500, depending on how out of their minds the seller is on eBay. So on the outside, mine in particular is candy-coated multicolored. It comes in a plethora of different tones, shades, and colors, but mine is Neapolitan. And as you can see, there's manual controls or there's lack thereof. You can either choose to have a square or rectangle image, black and white color, and holding down the shutter means your shutter speed is going to either be slower or quick depending on how fast or slow your thumb is. You do have a viewfinder in a sense, and switching between the sun and the cloud means the camera algorithm is either going to go from a wide f2.8 to an f8 choice. That's not to say you have much of a say in the matter, because you're more or less relying on the brain of this Holga Digital. Also worth noting that it has a tripod mount and a hot shoe that actually works, which is very cool to me. And again, the lens is more or less a pinhole-esque build that switches between an f2.8 to f8 aperture, but that doesn't really mean much to me because the sensor is only 1/3.2. So it's essentially always wide open. Anyways, I remember hearing years ago, I think it was on a Chelsea and Tony Northrup video, that you shouldn't trust a camera that runs on AA batteries. Well, surprise. So again, if I pull out the batteries and we look on the interior of this, again, we're getting an 8 megapixel image out of this camera. No RAW capabilities. You're only shooting JPEGs, which is what you're seeing on this video. So while we talk about performance, I'm gonna show you the images that I've gotten literally from the top of Canada to the bottom of the United States with the Holga here. And it's kind of what you'd expect a Lomo dingy digital style image. I find myself using the camera on a 4:3 aspect ratio or with the sun aperture setting. The imaging can stretch depending on your aperture ratio, time of day, what you ate, how the wind or sun looked at you. It's just honestly random, but you get this weird distortion from time to time, and you just kind of have to work with it. But honestly, it's all part of the experience when using the Holga Digital. I'd say just watch your color or black and white settings, because I've lost some narrative power by leaving my settings on one or the other by accident. So my thoughts on this camera, when I looked back at the reviews when this came out, I didn't think it got a fair shake because people were comparing this Holga Digital with its tiny panfish eye size sensor to the medium format film cameras that they've released yesteryear, and that's just not fair. I think this should be looked at as a standalone system. But on the flip side of that, I've never owned any of their Holga film cameras, but I do like the images that come from this. Well, let me back up. It's not the images I like, it's the experience I get when shooting this, because it allows me to take a step back not chimp at the lack of back screen, and just focus on what's around me. I don't even have to worry about if I got a good shot or not because I can't see until I get home. That's not to say I nail every image with this Holga. It's quite the opposite, but the ones I do get, I feel like I've earned, if that makes sense. So using this camera has been very therapeutic to me because it lets me focus on the now. And when I get back to using my more expensive, bigger professional cameras, I'll relish the days when I carried this around. Now, that doesn't mean I won't have this with me because I probably will. Although when this was released, people were thinking of this like it's gonna be a digital film camera. It didn't live up to a lot of consumer standards, but to me it does. It's almost relieving to take a step out of that megapixel war with needing the biggest sensor and most expensive glass and just focusing on the now, even if that means JPEG only 8 megapixel images. And to backpack, lately I've been seeing a shift in photography to where people are making these candid lomography style images anyways. So maybe at large we can see a push away from having to get 100 megapixel large format sensors and just focus on the creative process or simply imaging without the need for having the most expensive gear. So the point of this video is just to shine a light on what makes a good image. Is it the gear or is it the narrative behind the composition? That's not for me to answer. It's subjective and it can vary from person to person, but this is a fun camera to use. And if you can find one at a reasonable price, I suggest you pick one up because it's been a hoot. I'm short on words. That's it for now. Thank you for watching and I will see you next time.